Hey, I'm Michael Dorinda,
And I'm Jake Bennett.
and welcome to episode 191 of the North Meet South Web Podcast.
Hey, folks. Well, today, wow, okay, let me actually start with the weekend, Michael. I don't think you knew this. We had 8 tornadoes in our county last Friday. Eight.
Eight.
And 3 of them came through my city.
Right.
And one of them went like between my house and our good friend Jordan Brill's house. Like literally went right between our houses. Um, Crazy. So we were without power for a while. Like all the power lines were like bent over,
Wow.
like touching the ground. It was wild. And then since we didn't have power, my sump pump was not
Oh, no.
working. Do you
Oh,
know what this is? Okay. If you do not know, there is a hole in basements in some of these states, and it's a spot where like all the water that would normally come in like to your foundation, if you didn't have it, all this water like gathers in this hole, and
mhm.
then this pump pumps all the water out of your basement to make sure that your basement doesn't flood. Well, with no power, you have no sump pump, and we just finished our basement not long ago. And it was on my list of things to do to get a battery backup or something. Did not do it. And so I was bailing water out of this hole for 4 hours until the power came back on at 2:30 in the morning.
Oh,
Dude,
no.
it was a rough one.
At least the
But
at least the basement didn't
lesson
flood,
learned.
I guess.
No, totally. Lesson learned. I ordered my backup and it is getting here on Wednesday. So,
Oh, good.
oh
Good.
boy.
Tick that off the to-do list. So that
Yes.
okay, two things then.
Okay.
Is this common like tornado season for you, or is this uncommon?
I have never had a tornado go through our town ever, like
Okay.
ever. It's been like 50 years. Um, there was one in
But is
like
this
a town,
tornado
maybe
like tornado season
sort
more
of.
broadly?
Yeah, sort of. But it has never been like this. This has been the first
Mm,
year ever where like
right.
Andy, who I work with, is a big weather nerd,
Mhm.
and I say that in the best sense of the word. And he will let me know if there's something going on that I need to know about. And 3 times this year, he's texted me, been like, "Hey, by the way, there's tornadoes like just around you, like or going to be, so be careful." And this time, he was spot on. He literally sent me a picture of a map and drew arrows and said they're going to be coming right through here. This was like hours before, and sure enough, I could pretty much put an overlay of the tornado path on a map and put his arrows on there, and they were about the same spot. It was pretty incredible. So anyway, yeah, it was a wild one, but
So
thankfully
the other
all
thing, were you
safe.
do you have to hang out in the basement for this, or are you
Mm-hmm.
just like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Yep. Exactly.
Well,
Yeah,
at
we
least
were
you were
all in the
near to
basement.
where you had to be bailing water out anyway.
Yeah. Exactly.
You'd
Yeah.
know
It could
pretty
have.
quickly if you had a problem.
Yes. It could have been much worse. I will say.
Mm.
There was a lot of variables at play that actually made it not quite as terrible as it could have been, but it was still a huge pain in the neck. So, yep. Was glad to have made it through that one safe and sound and no
Glad you're
loss of
okay. It's
property or
crazy.
life. Like nobody died, thankfully, in town. But like a friend of ours, her car got smashed by a tree. The tree fell on her car, smashed the car. So big bummer on that one. But
Look forward to insurance premiums going up now.
exactly. So how's
Well,
your
glad.
how's your week been?
Yeah. Yeah, it's been okay. Eli had his first soccer game, like club
Oh,
soccer
fun.
game on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
weekend, and so it was an away game at 8 a.m. on Sunday, which is always fun. And we woke
Mm-hmm.
up quarter to seven, so 6:45 we were
Okay,
up
okay.
on a Sunday morning, which is what you want,
Yeah,
of
this feels
course.
odd. Yeah, exactly.
And after having like mild weather all of last week, we woke up Sunday morning and it was raining, but it was like 20 degrees Celsius. So it was still warm on Sunday morning. It was just raining. So, and even now it's like 27 degrees Celsius today, which is, we've still got that tail end of um summer here
Yeah.
when, we're 2/3 of the way through autumn, fall, whatever you want to
Mm-hmm.
call it. So
Yep,
it's
yep.
nice that that's keeping on. But yeah, great game. He like, I don't know, there's just like, it's funny going to all of their trainings and watching them, and because they're all mates and they're all hanging out and they're all mucking around. It's hard to get them, and they're like 7 and
Yeah.
8 years old, so they're all just mucking around. they're
Totally.
broadly doing the things, but because it's skills drills and things like that, they're just doing the same thing over and over again. So eventually they get bored with it, and so they start mucking
And they
around.
just, yeah, exactly.
Um, but when they get on the pitch, this switch flicks and they just go, and it's just great to see them gel and that all of the things that they're practicing and that you don't think necessarily that they're taking on board, that they have those skills that they are looking to pass, that they're spreading out, they're
Oh, that's
staying in their
good, actually.
positions.
Yeah.
So yeah, and for the first game of the year, I think they ended up winning 2-1, which is good as well. So yeah,
That's
it's
really great. Yeah. I mean, my
going
son
well.
plays soccer, but they're not passing much. They're basically
Mm.
like they're trying, we're teaching them this year to try and like dribble the ball.
Hmm.
Like don't just boot it up the field every time you
Yeah.
touch it. Like try and control the ball, like move it
Hmm.
around some people and then, get a pass if you can, but most of the time they're just kicking the
Most of the
ball,
time it's just yeah.
trying to
It's
score.
and
So,
it's I was talking to one of the other mums because her husband coaches one of the older year levels, and I said it's hard because obviously with club sport it's a little bit different to school sport in that you're paying money for it, you're doing it as an extracurricular activity, and so you're bringing your kids there to participate, and so you expect that the level is a bit higher and the engagement from the coaches, and then the expectations are higher as well. At the same time, they're 7 and 8 years old, like I said. So
right.
I don't know how much do you push them. What do you like? What are you drilling into them at that age where you want them to still enjoy it? That they're going to pick things up as they go and not, go, this is too hard or I don't enjoy it. So I try and stay back and not get too involved because
I
I'd
can't
be one
help
of those people
myself.
that takes it too seriously.
Oh
So I'll
yeah,
get in there
that's me.
before training starts. I'll get in and I'll go and stand in goals and have 6 or 7 of these kids all just barrel the ball at me at the same time to try and stop goals. And I'll if they're if Eli wants someone to pass the ball with and things like that. But he always wants me to go out and do goal practice and like, Dad, you go and be goalie. I'm like, I don't want. You can kick goals. You can kick the ball very hard. I don't like being on the receiving end of that. Um, I said if you want to do like drills and skills and things like that, passing the ball and all of the other stuff, that's fine. But like, just yeah, getting in the goals is not fun. And
No.
and the thing is, at this age, they're playing on like a half-sized pitch. But the trouble is, they can, if they try, kick from one end of the pitch to the other,
Yeah.
and so it's
Yeah, because
getting
it's
them
not
to
that large.
not
Yeah.
do that because look to pass and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, it is a lot of fun though.
Yeah, it is. It's a good it's like it's fun to see like what they're capable of.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
it's cool to just see at 8 years old that they have like some skills that they can use out there, and so it's just a lot of fun. I agree. Like I do take it too seriously, but I'm not a mad dad. I just want them to do the best that they can do, and so I'm
Hmm.
trying to like. So I'm like an unofficial coach. I don't come
Hmm.
with all the practices, but on game days I help, and so I'm typically helping with the goalie and with defense. And so this year we've been trying to teach the kids like to push up on defense, which has been
Yeah.
insanely helpful. So like they're containing the ball on the other side of the field, and it's just had a lot more opportunities to score. Whereas on the other side of the field, their defense always just sits right in front of the goal, and so all it takes is one person to boot it over half field, and you're back on their side of the
Yeah.
pitch. So
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, it's been a lot of fun. So anyway, hey, I think that we might have David Hemphill on here in a little bit, but before we do, I would love to hear about what's going on in your world. I talked a lot last show,
Mm.
so I would love to hear about kind of what's going on in your world.
We're doing a lot of work at the moment in offboarding our customers from Salesforce and bringing them into our own platform. So I won't take any credit for it because it was majority of the rest of the team was working on this stuff where we sat down at like September last year and decided that the renewal fees and what we were getting out of Salesforce was not what we wanted to continue paying for. Um, and it was easier for us to build something fit for purpose and exactly the right size for what we need by ourselves. So from September last year, when our product people sat down and figured out what are we building, who are we building it for, what does it look like, how do we integrate it, to when we then went through and did the actual planning of it and built everything out and then delivered it. We had customers onboarding onto this new platform in February. So, we're talking 4.5 months over the Christmas and New Year break that this was built. And we started moving customers across. So my job as part of this process is to then get the customers from Salesforce into our platform and then,
Mm-hmm.
syncing up all the data, making sure that everything comes across, that everything's linked up correctly, that we've got all these bits and pieces in place. It's been an interesting challenge, but fortunately, Claude is quite good. If you give it
Yes, it
the
is. Oh my gosh,
tools,
yes, it is.
it can write Salesforce query language. So it'll go and write all the queries to figure out like what fields are available, how do they map them. It does a pretty good job at guessing, based on the fields that are in the accounts and contacts in Salesforce, this is where they need to go in our platform and all of this kind of stuff. So it's been an interesting journey in terms of like orchestrating Claude to get it to write various different migration pieces and having it run, dry run utilities and things like that. It's
Yeah.
very difficult to test any of this stuff because we can't really control the Salesforce side of things. This is not the kind of data that we can play around with in any kind of testable, reproducible way. Like it's a one-way sync. And so we can only test so much before we just have to run it and hope that it's been done correctly. So
Which the dry run flags really do, I feel like, give so much confidence because you can push it into production and then you can run dry run. And it's like you can see exactly what's going to happen. Like, oh, yeah, yep, validate. That's exactly it. And then you're good to go. Yep.
Yeah. So it's been an
really
interesting
cool.
process with that. But just like everyone, I think at the moment, just going deeper and figuring out where the rough edges are and looking at different tooling options. I know, said try and get David on to talk about.
Yeah, he's coming on in just a minute. He said he's grabbing his
project.
microphone.
Yeah. So I had a bit of a play around with that and I couldn't quite get it to work the way that I needed it to, which I suspect I know why, but we can ask David about that when he's on here. But just looking at like Matt Pocock, who has like I think it's AI hero or something like that. We could put a link in the show notes to his stuff, but he's got some YouTube content. He's doing stuff on Twitter all the time talking about just how he's using AI and finding all these different ways of doing it. He's got this grill me skill, which is like a 2-sentence skill that he's got there. And basically it just boils down to incessantly ask me questions about the plan until we resolve
I actually love
everything.
that idea.
Which is great. It does like keep spinning though. Like you can be there for quite a long time just answering questions. And it's very good in terms of the questions that it's asking you and getting you to consider things that you might not have considered. And I've used that to kind of build out spec files of like, this is what we need to do at a very high level. And then say, grill me about this plan to figure out where are the gaps? What are we missing? It'll go and figure out, hey, you haven't thought about this. Do you want to do this? Is this outside of scope? And, some of the questions are very simple to answer. Some of them require a bit of thought. Some of them involve, bringing in product people and saying, hey, what do we actually want to do here? So at the end of it, after a grueling, could be 20 minutes and like you think 20 minutes is not grueling, but it could ask you a lot of questions in that time. It could be an hour. Like it's like, I'll just quickly do this and set it off and then I'll, go for a run or whatever. No, it's still going. Like an hour later, I'm still going with this thing. So you can tell it to stop whenever you want, but I think it's important to go through the process until eventually it comes through with like 10, 15 different points.
I'm guessing it's probably sort of like any spot where the planner feels like it has to make a conditional decision. Like I could go this way or this way. And instead of it just like sort of using its own prediction model to say, I think we should go this direction, it doesn't really assume anything. It's probably like, nope, ask the question. Like I could do this or I could do this. What do you want me to do? Or something else.
Right. Yeah, because I've found in plan files, like I'll get it to do the plan using the plan mode in Claude, and then I will switch out to write mode and I'll get it to write it to a markdown file, and then I'll start a new session. I say, read this plan. And then like very often at the end of the plan, there's like 8 to 10 things where it's like unresolved questions. I'm like, well, they're not unresolved. You never asked me those questions in the first place. So then you've got to like go through and let's resolve these questions and write them back to the file. So where I got up to now is once you get this plan file, you can just say, hey, Claude, go and implement this. And that kind of it can work okay, but it can also go off the rails in terms of what it's doing. And because there's not really enough context in there. But what we'll talk to David about, which I thought was very interesting, was his Gent project, where it would take a spec file and then it would go and it will split out. Here he is. It'll
There he
go
is.
and split out that spec document into actual tasks for your agent to implement, and puts it on a Kanban board, and it's very useful. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about that process. And David, I think there was some issues that I had specifically around Gent wanting to use um, copy on write, and because I have the repository checked out as a work tree, I think it got upset because it was trying to it was seeing unstaged changes that were there or weren't there, and so I didn't want to do anything. So I went on a bit of an adventure to kind of distill what you had built, to like reverse engineer it into something that would work in my particular context. But before we go too much deeper in that,
Yeah.
David, you're here. You should introduce yourself and then tell the people what Gent is and what you're actually working on.
Yeah, we can
Can
hear you
hear you.
perfect. Yep.
Can you hear me? Awesome. I haven't used this mic in a long time. So, I'm David Hemphill, Laravel guy, work as a low, formerly of Nova notoriety,
The Laravel ghost.
infamous. Yeah. And so just past about a month, I've been working on Gent, which is a take on. It's a macOS app that is a take on the Ralph loop that was so popular
So I want
a
to,
month ago.
yeah, I want to talk about this
Started
idea of a
building
Ralph
it.
loop, and I also wouldn't mind, like, if we can take probably like 1.5 minutes here. I want to set the stage for like sort of what I feel like has been the progression of using some of this stuff. So I remember like a couple of years ago when GPT first came out, it was like, oh my gosh, if I want to put a Google map on a page, I can say to it, write me a Google map sort of like little frame and put a pin in this spot. And it would maybe get it most of the way right. And that was like mind blowing. And you'd be like, okay, write it in Vue. And it would maybe do a write it in React and it could do it. And that was just, oh, so cool. But then you'd have to copy and paste it into your editor, all that stuff, right? Then we had GitHub Copilot, which was like straight integrated into your IDE. So it could make suggestions for you in line. And that was like mind blowing. So cool, right? And then the models just kept getting better and better. And then it felt like all of these CLI or similar things came out. So Claude Code came out, obviously, which was like, okay, now you're not interacting with it on the web or interacting with it in your IDE. You're interacting with it in your command line environment. And then you had like past that, this is where I start to get a little bit fuzzy, because there's things like Conductor, and Conductor was sort of like, I don't know exactly. Basically, it was you could have multiple agents running at the same time, I suppose. Is sort of like what Conductor was doing. Is sort of, it was what's the best word? Like orchestrating like a couple different agents was the idea there.
Yeah.
And then you've got past that, you've got even more now. So you have some people who have like, you have Aaron Francis with his solo project. So you've got, agents kind of running all over the place in your machine. So he's like, I'm going to create something that's going to centralize them so you can sort of manage the different projects that you've got going on at any time. So in actuality, it feels like every developer is becoming a project manager in some sense. Like they're all almost, their job now is to write the requirements and then to spawn off something and have it go do the work, and then you inspect it later. So I'm curious where Gent sort of fits in there and what the Ralph loop thing is. I don't know what that is. So if you could just sort of jump from that point and sort of explain to me sort of like from that idea of like maybe something like Conductor, where you're sort of trying to orchestrate multiple agents. Where do you go from there, and where does yours like fit into that whole puzzle there?
Yeah, with something like Conductor or Polyscope, they allow you to work on multiple things at once on multiple repositories or the same repository. And they give you that typical chat interface that you're used to. So you can basically, you're manning the helm, but you're allowing the agent to write the code for you basically on your whimsy. Whereas something like Gent or Ralph loops in general, or even Chief, which is made by Matthias Hansen from GeoCodio, it's a TUI for Ralph loops. Its thing is you put in a PRD or a text spec, something that lists all the requirements, the acceptance criteria, uh, a really full out document, and you feed that into the Ralph Loop software
And
of
PRD just being a
whatever it is you're
project
using.
requirement document, right? That's what we're talking about. So like sometimes you would use even
Yeah,
Claude or something like that to help you write a project requirement document. Yeah, plan.
Mhm.
Yep.
right. A plan, even just a plan. Um, you take something like that and you feed it into the software, and it breaks it up into little tasks, into ideally tasks that would be easy to complete in one
Interesting. Okay.
context. So you wouldn't have to like blow the context up. And that's the kind of the whole point, is that it gets fed in to Gent or whatever. It gets broken up into little tasks, and each of those tasks can be handled within one context window. And on top of that, it gets fed its little description of what happens, and then it runs through it, and it can write back a progress report of things that it ran into or patterns that it recognized or established in that, and that gets fed into the next iteration, the next task. And so that it gets if you were to try to do like some of these big documents, what would happen is that you would blow your context window out on all these LLMs, because you can't, even everyone knows when you do like even agent chat, your context window goes out, and then the agent is basically an idiot from there on out until it uses, we have methods like compaction that can help, but this kind of allows the agent to go from end to end without you having to manually do any of that compaction or figuring that out. And so I thought that was really cool. And Ralph Loops had a moment.
And
for,
is a Ralph loop
I haven't heard about it
basically
much
this
now,
idea
but
that it's feeding back? It's creating its own feedback loop, sort of like it's doing a little thing and then feeding
mm-hmm.
back interesting or progress reports basically to the top level agent or something like that. Is that the idea?
It's think of it more like a pattern where a prompt is fed into the LLM through a loop, and it repeats until
Okay.
the task is completed.
Okay. So the biggest reason that I would use something like this is because, like, I'm wondering if there's multiple reasons and multiple advantages. Is it because I feel like my project requirement document is so large that I'm going to overflow the context window, and so I feel a need to reach for something like Gent? Or is there or is it more effective to have something split into like, okay, you're going to work on the front end, you're going to work on the back end, and you're going to work on the database? Is there advantages to that just by itself, even if I have a really small project requirement document? Or is there some idea of it can run more independently in the background, so I don't have to be constantly answering questions? Like maybe it's yes to all of those. I'm not sure. I'm just curious. I've seen you guys chatting about it recently, and I see like TJ be like, I literally just set this thing up and just watch it go. And he's like, I can just see everything on these Kanban boards just getting checked off. Like it seems really interesting. I'm just curious what like if I'm just pasting a big plan in and it's able to just go do it with YOLO mode or whatever, like what's the difference between that
Mm-hmm.
and like what Gent is offering, other than maybe like an interface that's helpful? Okay,
Well,
okay.
primarily it's going to be the context route you're going to have, because if you just send it on YOLO mode, it's going to have, on any sort of sizable PRD, you're going to have compaction happening, and so that's just like kind of watering down all of the learnings that the agent has, or the agent has thus far learned. It's kind of just a watered down version. There's compaction that's good for a lot of stuff. But where the loop is better is that every instance of the loop gets a fresh context. So it's all fresh. There's no, it hasn't decided, we need this
Totally.
piece, this
That
piece
makes
that may
sense.
not be relevant. It's fed exactly the next task. And then, because of the persistent memory after each loop is completed, it writes to it. It's a persistent memory store, uh, you know, or just a text file. It doesn't have to be fancy. That next session starts where the last left off. And so like it's a very tailored way of like giving the next loop iteration context. It also is able to go from end to end without you, asking
Mhm.
asking you a bunch of questions, or bothering with you with different permissions and stuff
Now,
like
does
that.
that operate like? Because that's something I would love to be able to do, is to not have to check in on it or have it ask me all these things constantly. Where I'm like, because I've not been brave enough yet to run something in YOLO mode. Is there any? Does Gent have any sort of like sandboxing or anything like that, or is it still basically YOLO mode under the hood? Okay,
It's
okay.
YOLO mode under the hood, basically.
Um,
Yeah.
Yes. So in theory, if your PRD said something like, delete my
Yeah.
home folder, it could.
I am last week I went through and turned on auto mode as part of my Claude settings, and I find that that is a pretty good balance. Like before, I'd be like, go and do this thing while I go and get a coffee or grab lunch or whatever else, and it'll be done when I come back, and only to come back and see the stupid thing sitting there asking for permission to run like ls or cat on a file or something that I just told it to read. And it happened all the time. But auto mode strikes a good balance, I think, between, I will go and ls a file and cat a file because you have told me to look at that file specifically. And it is also a little bit more intelligent about running commands, but not to the extent where like it'll figure out, no, I probably shouldn't run, rm the home directory or whatever else. So I found that to be very useful. But I think what I like about the Gent and what I've seen in attempting to use it, at least, not that there's anything wrong with Gent, I think it's just my particular use case is a little bit outside of what you're looking for, is taking that spec document and then splitting it out into like very small units of work. Because the problem that I think we all have, for those of us that are still looking at the code and intend to review it, is that it can do, all of the models can write a lot of code very quickly, and then it's like, I'm done 5 minutes later, but you've suddenly got 1,000 or 2,000 or 10,000 lines of code to review. So I think what I like about this kind of thing, especially if you're only doing one task at a time, is that they're very small units of work. It's doing very small slivers of change so that you can look at it and have in your mind good context of what is actually happened here before then committing it. So I'm still very much in that loop. Jake and I have spoken about previously about, we're in regulated industries. So whilst we're in
Yeah.
regulated industries, it's still important that we're looking at this code that is being generated and that we have good understanding of what it's doing. But having the process of, take this document, spit out all of the tasks that are quite small, to write a learnings document as you iterate through and implement each of them. And then it's up to me to look at the code and then go, yeah, I'm going to commit this, or no, go back and change this. And that process, I think, introducing a little bit of friction on the review side, but also making it easy to split out these giant documents, which can be quite big, into smaller units of work, and to orchestrate them in such a way that, these things depend on previous tasks, so making sure that they're being built in the correct order. Because the plan can sometimes say do this and this and this, and then you go back and look at it at the end of it, and it's like, well, yes, it can do this and this and this, but we need to shuffle the order, or something that happens later leans on something that's happened here. And by default, it likes to do these very horizontal slices of like, do a database migration and then write a controller and then write a test, then write the front end. And it's like, there's nothing to inspect there. Whereas splitting it all out helps you kind of really hone in on that vertical slice. So I like this approach. Like,
Right.
by the time I got around to using these tools, it seemed insane to me that you would do anything other than plan first. Because as someone who has sat there and tried to talk my way through it, you get that context rot because you're polluting that context, saying, no, don't do that, no, do that. Well, try it this way, try it that way. And then before you know it, you've blown your context window. And even though we have these million token context windows now, really the only usable area is somewhere in the 300,000 to 400,000 tokens anyway. And beyond that, it starts to go crazy. But I saw Tariq, who's responsible for Claude or some aspect of Claude over at Anthropic, posted an article on X, the Everything app, the other day or last week or whenever it was, talking about the different ways to manage context. And there's this command inside of Claude called rewind, where you can go down a path and say, oh, try this, try that. No, that didn't work. And then based on your learnings, you can then rewind your session to a particular point And then with what you know after that exploration, say, okay, this is what we want to try. And that way you kind of manage your context that way without having to start a new session or to compact. And, obviously you lose fidelity, especially if you're using the agent to handle its own compaction. There's a good chance that it will decide, oh, this isn't important, and then you lose something forever in that process. So the review, the rewind allows you to specifically say, okay, let's go back to this point, and now I can start with this knowledge, and then you're preserving context that way. So yeah, all of these different tools and
Yeah.
ideas and approaches that kind of it's all in service, I think, of preserving the context window and the useful context window.
hmm Yeah, that's the major limitation that we have right now is how much can the AI keep in its brain usefully, and you might have these, like you said, these million token context windows, but they're all your usable context window is very small because it has to, basically reserve some of that memory for other tasks. Um, yeah, one of the big things I think about Gent that I'm trying to differentiate on with other sort of Ralph-like loop tools is that I haven't seen any of them that run
Mm-hmm.
multiple tasks in parallel, and I felt like the classic example I use when I'm developing the app right now is this invoice builder. It's like a single page invoice builder, and the first task might be create the index page, and the acceptance criteria is make sure it has a script tag and this thing, but then there's like four tasks that can run all at once. It's like create these fields, these fields, these fields, and they would never touch each other in the code. But in a lot of these task planners, they break them up and they go sequentially. And I just found that like really frustrating because those could be parallelized if there was two developers working in something like um, uh, any sort of screen sharing tool. They could both do them and not touch each other. And so I built the system basically that runs each task in its own work tree or copy on write clone, and those are then merged in uh, at the same time or when they're done, uh, so that you can enable parallelization up to
Dang.
I have it up to 8. I've had it up to
Can
8
you
at some points, which is really cool to me, and I haven't seen
can you
other
tell me
tools
what
do that
copy
yet.
on write is? I'm not familiar with that.
So with work trees,
Mm-hmm.
you're creating a clone
Yep.
basically in another folder. That's all the file system. So all of the file objects in the file system are copied in there. A copy on write is an approach that is built in like macOS, and I think Linux has it too, where it basically creates it, but it's just a pointer to
Gotcha.
the existing file system, and the
That
differences
makes
are
sense.
tracked, and
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
you save a
So
bunch of
is that
space.
just a part of like the Git installation on Mac and Linux you're saying, or is there some special like
That's
No,
file
it's
system.
separate.
Yeah.
It's
gotcha.
in macOS by
Gotcha.
itself.
Interesting. Okay. That's pretty cool. Yeah. Because I know like sort of originally it's always fun to kind of watch how your brain works. It's like I think you started with conductor and you were originally like, okay, I'm solving this problem where like I'm trying to spin up a work tree, but it has these issues that I'm having where like the env isn't linked over, or like some of these herd
Yeah.
isn't like linking a site that I could go preview. So like I'm gonna solve that problem with like some sort of conductor script thing, and then it's like, okay, screw that, don't need that anymore, I'm actually going to do this over, you know what I mean? It's like, but the learnings from those things are like influencing your decision making for these next projects, which is just, it's interesting to see. Okay, what?
Yeah, there's just so
Yes, it
much.
is.
It's going so fast that there's just so many things that you can do. And I mean, I can't take credit for the copy on write. I didn't really even know it was a thing until it was in Polyscope,
Is
and so
polyscope
it was like,
Marcel's
oh, I
thing?
was like, why are they
Yeah.
using that? And then
Yeah.
it's like, yes, it's it's another multi-agent orchestration software, kind of like Conductor in the same zone of that.
It
And
also yelled
so
at me about my work trees.
polyscope did, yeah.
Yeah.
PhpStorm actually, which is the editor I use, up until just the most recent version, did not have support for work trees at all, really, like not first party support. It would just it would throw fits if you did that. And so in the most recent release, their 2026 release, they now do have first class support for work trees, which has been pretty cool. So I've used it once, but I upgraded, like I was 2 versions
Yeah.
behind. I upgraded, and then upgraded again to get to the work tree one, and it does work. It works great. So that's been pretty cool. So you can swap between different work trees and see how that's going. Um,
I talked to
Oh,
several work tree haters that I just feel like they haven't really understood it yet. Like,
mhm.
what's the point? It's like, I just want to build the thing. But they're still thinking in like,
Yes.
I'm doing one task and one thing, and there's, I'm not saying that we're better, but like there's some people that are just like, I
Mhm.
can actually work on a couple of things at once, because especially with some tasks that are like take forever, you're like, I can go work on this other complete part of the system in another agent, and it's like, and do it in a work tree where that those changes are not overlapping and hurting
Yeah.
each other and messing up everything. Or you need, maybe you're solving a bug in one work tree, you need the database set up in a certain way to do that, and you have like your main app that you're working on a feature and has the database in its certain state, and they're not messing with each other. You can set up work trees in that sort of way, which is cool.
So, Michael,
But
you
you're
had
right.
said something about like the idea of it splitting it into smaller chunks of work. Does this actually end up creating multiple pull requests? Or are you able to sort of split out those pieces and see those pieces, Michael? Or what? I don't understand that. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So the way, I mean, in the context of Gent, it allows you to either run once, like run the loop through once, and it'll go and do one task, and then it'll wait, or you can say do them all. Now, the way that I'm working is that I want to be able to do just one task, do one
Okay.
task, and I want to see the diff. I want to see what's changed. I want to see how it's changed, and then I can decide, is this acceptable? Does it follow the conventions and standards and all this kind of stuff? Which, I mean, typically it does, but sometimes it does things a little bit like it wants to use for each loops everywhere instead of collections and whatever. So, just like taste things more
Mhm.
than anything else. But once it goes to the end of that loop, I want to see what's there and I want to decide, yes, I want to commit this. And then I'll run my like committer, my git commit agent skill, whatever else. And then I'll say, okay, let's go again. And so it'll just blow away the whole context. It'll start, it'll load the schema, it'll load the next task, it'll load the progress and the learnings and everything else. So that's all in context. So if anything is deviated, because obviously the plans change, they're plans, they're human, things might change as you go. And so the learnings is important to guide the future implementation um, based on what has actually happened, not what we thought was going to happen before we started the work, which is how we would work in software anyway. The plan is not rigid. It's we will do something, we'll try it out. That didn't work. Okay, that changes how we're going to do things in the future.
Hmm.
So,
No, that's
but yeah,
actually
it's
that's
important to be able to see the diff before it gets committed, because sometimes Claude will run off and it'll start committing things up like, well, pump the brakes. I didn't tell you to keep going. I didn't tell you, and it'll do two or three like on its own, but in the context of the session, it'll do one or two or three, and then it gets carried away with itself and it just keeps going. It's like, stop, don't do that. So the
that's
loop in this
interesting.
context
Yeah.
allows you to make sure that like it's only doing one thing at a time.
So you basically it will go through your PRD, it'll break it into tasks, and then you can say, okay, do the first one. And then
Mhm.
after it's done with the first one, you can say, okay, let me take a look at that. Yeah, you're heading the right direction. Keep going. And then
Yeah.
okay, I'll break out the next piece. Okay, that actually seems very interesting. Yeah.
I-
Yeah, I've used it that way a lot, especially in the earlier things that I've used the loops for.
Mm-hmm.
Is like, I want to
yeah.
babysit it, make sure it's going to do it the right way, and that, and yeah, and
Hmm.
it's very useful
I think the
to do
original
it that way.
intent behind the Ralph loop was like go and generate all of the tasks and just have the loop basically says, take go and look at the list of tasks, find the next one that isn't complete, implement it, then go again. That's kind of the intent. Being that, you would give it a set of tasks to do overnight, you'd let it run, burn through all your tokens overnight, and you come back to some working piece of something. Um, I think in a practical sense, especially in like a agentic engineering context where we're still writing software that people have to use and that we still have to support and we still have to have some understanding of how it functions, so if it breaks we need to go and fix it. um you know I think the underlying methodology was kind of in the right direction. It's just let's just burn tokens forever was maybe a little bit unhinged.
Yeah, the initial approach is very brute force. Just throw tokens at the problem. It's like, imagine you're trying to get the AI to like take out the garbage or something, and the only way, you know it knows that it did a good job is if the garbage is taken out, and whatever description of that is, and it just tries to do that task, and it's like, oh, my CI didn't pass and the garbage wasn't taken out. So it just tries it again, and it just tries it again, and it just tries again. Oh wait, the trash looks like it's outside. Now it's passed. Okay, it's just kind of a brute force thing. I don't think of like Gent as so like primitive, if I could say it like that. I don't think of it like that. I think the best results that you get out of something like Gent is it depends on the input, right? If the input's good, you're going to get better outputs, and so the shift is how well can you write your PRDs now? How detailed can you get? How many edge cases can you find that you can steer the LLM in the planner into not creating tasks that aren't valid for what you're trying to achieve. That's the real thing that's going to be the challenge, for better or worse. Because I used to like to just like throw stuff out there, like the trash example. I like to throw stuff in there. Okay,
Yeah.
that didn't work. I'm gonna try
Yeah.
another thing. Back when we were hand tilling the
That's kind of
land.
like what I feel. Even some senses, like I think maybe what I am doing sometimes is I'm the one breaking up the PRD. I know everything that needs to happen like in my head, and I am doing the tiny little tasks like, hey, I need you to do this next. Okay, you did that. All right, now I need you to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you did that. Now I need. So it's like, hey, I need the migration that's going to add 2 indexes on these things, and then it just does it. I'm like, okay, great. Now that you added the index, I actually need you to write this query that's going to go do this thing over here. So like I feel like, but the interruptions keep happening, right? I keep having to sort of like prompt it. So it is an interesting idea. Like how does Gent doesn't help you write the PRD though, right? Yeah. So I'm curious
Not yet.
if you know so plan mode is great in Claude, right? And people are writing skills. Michael was just talking about this before you came on. There's a skill called Grill Me, which basically like just asks you exhaustive list of questions, like asks over and over and over and over and over. But it sort of tries to help you find all the edges that you haven't thought about, right? And this always happens when like you have a junior developer on your team, right? And you say, hey, go do this thing. And then they go do it. And you're like, how the heck did you come up with that? You're like, oh, well, it wasn't specified. In your brain, you're like, of course you would do it this way, though. And they don't. They totally do it a different way. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's like, I'm interested to see if there's any tooling or any sort of conventions, or if there's things from like project managers that have very little sort of like technical experience with how to build something, but have a ton of experience with how to ask really good questions about problems and get to good answers that they can deliver to a team that can then develop on them. Like, is there going to be some tooling that's going to be developed by groups like that can say like, listen, if you're wanting to write a really good PRD, you need to be asking these types of questions in order to get to the correct answers? I don't know.
Well, there are tools like that are already in existence, and one of them that I know of is called
Oh, cool.
Chat PRD,
Are
and
you
it's
guys,
that
are you
kind of
using
thing.
that?
And I even have something else. I'm not. I have another thing that I'm working on. It's called Live Mark. That is kind of a collaborative PRD generation or authoring software, but Gent took over before I was able to focus hardcore on that. Kind of like, imagine Google Docs
Yeah, yeah,
where you
yeah.
can collaborate on the document together, but also there's an AI in the loop that you can modify the document, ask it questions, and it has context of your code base. It's another thing
Hmm.
that I'm working on.
I'm curious what like if somebody was to offer me the job I have now, but say like you have to go back a year and you can't use AI stuff, I'd be like, I just don't know if I'm interested. Like it's made my life so much better. You know what I mean? Like there's so many things that I've done I just literally never would have done before because it would have taken so much time for me to figure it out. And it's like, that'll take 5 minutes now. Like, go do this. And it just does it. Like, there's been so many monotonous tasks that I've been able to accomplish in 6 months that I haven't done in the last 3 years that I've wanted to do. I just didn't have the time to do it. And so like that's like the trajectory of how it's like impacted like my development workflow. And I'm just curious how it will continue to change. Like what is life going to look? This been for me, I've been using it like intentionally and quite often for since December, really, since December. And it feels like it's been an insane amount of change. I really do feel like in 3 years, it's not even going to be recognizable what we were doing a year ago. Like it will not look the same at all. It hardly looks the same right now. So
Well, if the AI houses have their way, our jobs are at danger. That's their stated goal is to get rid of us essentially, or 50% of all knowledge work or whatever, which is a scary
I
kind
don't see
of
that happening. I don't see that happening.
myopic way of
Well,
I
happening.
it's
But
funny, seeing. I mean, obviously
yeah,
in our bubble, yeah, it's everyone's using it and it's everyone's getting more done and whatever else. But like, you talk to other people that I mean, they might be using ChatGPT or they might have used Nano Banana or something like that, but they're not. Yeah, it's
yeah.
not
Sora.
like, yes, it is going to help, but I think it's going to take a while for people to get on board. And there's all the stories that these companies have fired thousands of people, but then sometime later they've gone, oh, whoops, we actually need some of those people back because AI is not actually doing what we thought it was going to do. So, I mean, who knows how long is a piece of string, how long this will take, what it's going to look like. I think there's obviously lots of things that still need to be done by people. It's hard
Okay,
to tell.
so I'll share this article. It's called "The Eternal Promise: A History of Attempts to Eliminate Programmers." And so it goes all the way back to like COBOL. Like COBOL was supposed to be this whole idea of like the business user was going to be able to write code without any need to have developers because it was just going to be so simple, right? And it just never was realized. It didn't work out that way. COBOL was like they're going to eliminate the bottleneck of specialized programmers. Business analysts can write their own programs. It did actually succeed. I mean, obviously, like it runs tons of like the world's like banks and like trading
Mm-hmm.
and like all
Mm-hmm.
sorts of insane. Yeah, yeah.
Critical
But it
systems. Yeah.
didn't eliminate programs. It just created a brand new profession of COBOL programmers, right? You could read the language, but writing it correctly, efficiently, maintainable. Like it still required some of those specialized skills, and not only that, but like deep understanding of the systems that they were writing things for. And
Mm-hmm.
so, like, I don't know. It's really interesting. This article talks about literally they go through like 5 or 6 different iterations of how this has been the promise that's always been. And they're like, it's just AI is different and it acknowledges that, but there will be this enduring value of like understanding. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
still have to understand the requirements. You have to be able to write the PRD. And to that extent, we will continue to exist. Because somebody has to know. Somebody has to know how these systems work together, right? They have to know the business process. They have to know how part A connects to part Z. And so, I mean, really, at the end of the day, that's what we are. Is like we are really good at figuring out those connections. It's just a lot easier to actually have the back end work of it done now. But I don't know.
It's also
Yeah.
whilst business stakeholders are unable to actually communicate what they want, I think we'll be okay because, like you say, a lot of the job is interpreting and understanding what they actually want and how to then translate that into working software that people can use. So I don't like the
It's like
and AI. The models are sycophantic. Yeah, of course we can do that. It sounds like a great idea. And they'll just do whatever people ask them to do, whether it's going to work or not. So
you've seen this meme with Rick Rubin, and he's like this jazz guy, and he's like, no, I have no technical, like I cannot play music at all. Have you seen this, Michael?
no, or
Okay, so
maybe
like
I don't know.
he's being interviewed, and he's like, so why do they, can you play music? He's like, no. Can you run a soundboard? He's like, no. He's like, I have no technical expertise. He's like, well, why do they pay you? And he said, because I know what I like, and I'm able to clearly communicate the reasons for why I like those things, and people value that, right? That's it. Like that is
Mm.
literally what we will be paid for in the future. We won't actually be paid for writing the code. It's just like I can clearly understand a set of requirements and then communicate to the machine how to make those decisions, right? Um, it's just really interesting. But you like honestly, like maybe we just sit in an office and watch the machine run.
Mm.
I mean, it's totally plausible that that could be the case. I don't know. Um, it's going to be really interesting. I think for those of us who are in the correct positions, I think our jobs are completely safe though. I,
I think if you have this existing knowledge, you're safe for a while, probably.
yeah,
I think if you're coming
yeah,
into the
that's tough.
industry, good luck. You've got a lot of stuff that's now basically going one layer up because people can create without having like deep understanding of how systems work, um, and get pretty far. I think that makes it hard for people that
If
are trying to learn
if
the
it's
fundamentals
greenfield,
to
if
learn
it's
them.
greenfield, I would say that there are a lot of people who can get a long way in like those sorts of things. But like for existing products, like think of how complex like even the simplest decisions are that you guys have to make at the company you work at, David. Like it's insane. Like you're talking about like adding a button, right? How many different layers of like thought has to go into making that thing work, and the different teams that have to be involved with making that decision. Michael, it's the same thing for you. Like you were just talking about how like you're shifting over to Salesforce now. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like all the people and all the decisions that had to be made to get to that point. It's just with existing systems that have sufficient complexity, just having an AI be like, go write the thing, I don't think is going to be sufficient. I agree with you, David, that like if you're just getting into the industry and that's sort of what you're doing is like, I'm going to write my SaaS that's going to be another to-do app, that stuff is completely eliminated. Even the people that are really smart like yourself, David, I see people working on some of these projects, and the really bummer part about it is like Claude next week comes out with the thing that does the thing.
Yeah.
That's what's so defeating about it. It's like it used to be like somebody would come out with an app, and 2 years later Apple would reproduce it and just rip them off completely. Claude's doing it in a week. Like their team, like is like somebody came out with like, here's a remote control thing. All you have to do is hook up Tailscale, and then you can do coding from your phone. And then the next week, Claude's like remote control. You know what I mean? Like some people are like, oh, here's this voice thing that you can just chat with /voice. You're done. Like they're killing everything as quickly as people are coming up with the idea. The Claude team has reproduced it, and so I don't know. It's tough. It's a tough time even in that space to be innovative because you're like, how long before I just get knocked off? Not very long.
This is kind of an aside, but I think it's like also very scary as somebody that creates products, and then I've dealt with like competition in the past. It's like the second that comes out,
Yeah.
the thing, your idea comes out and it has any sort of like depth of like, like even on like the page describes how it works. Somebody creates a well typed out prompt, and they're competing with you. And I think that's like really scary.
That's right.
First market advantage is so much smaller now.
And that was with like the Ralph loop and Jeffrey, the guy that like came up with the idea was just point the Ralph loop at an existing thing and say, just go and reproduce this, and then you've got that. It's that kind of world, and all it comes down to is how much money you're willing to sink into tokens to do it.
Yeah, I'd be curious, Matt Stauffer's perspective on some of this. He's probably talked about this a bit, but I'm curious if, like, I know, like they've said, some of their stuff has just been like, they're now getting called in to clean up people's vibe coded garbage, So it's like it's created another industry, like people's vibe coding, which was supposed to kill their industry, has now created a new industry of people who are fixing the vibe coded stuff. I don't know. It's
they're coming in with their lovable demos or whatever, or sometimes it's working software that they've glued together with Supabase and Vercel and all these other pieces, and it's kind of, to us it would look like duct tape, and string, but it works. And then there's this whole cottage industry of people coming in to make it
exactly.
like,
I mean, that's always been the case. There has always been, essentially my entire software development career was coming into something that like someone wrote in their garage over a month, right?
Some Rube Goldberg machine where
like all of the
ball
ISPs
goes down
some
this
access
thing
database that like some guy.
It's been like they wrote something in PHP 3 or early PHP 4, and it did the job. And it's like suddenly they've got to company with tens of thousands of customers. And it's like that software that you wrote then doesn't work anymore. So now we've got to, take it to the next level. This is going to happen. It's just going to happen more. But and whilst there's going to be more of that software around, people are not coming up with ideas at that scale. Not everyone can build whatever software they want, but not everyone is building software based on an idea that lots of other people want as well. Like that is not changing just because more people have access to the ability to write the software, I don't think. Ideas are hard to come by. So
as is good taste, I will say that. Like some of the things, I don't know, like you could have two companies create the same, like a product that works the same, and Apple ends up winning out because of the way that they've packaged it, or the way that it like just integrates a little bit more nicely with a particular thing, right? I do feel like, so like we were working on something recently where it was something as silly as like people are trying to connect to our VPN, and there's just little nuanced things that make it go from like it works to that feels like a really good experience for the user, and currently AI can help with that, where I can say, actually, no, there should be two buttons here. If they cannot connect, there should be two buttons, one that says create a ticket, one that says call our IT team. The AI never suggested that, right? Like it was just like fulfilling the things of what I asked it to do.
Yeah.
But it didn't have the taste or like the knowledge or the mind of the user to know what the thing was that they were going to want next in the case that it failed. It was just going to throw an error message in their face.
Or it just assumes that it was never going to fail, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't think, it could break. No, you just told me to add a button that connects to this thing and just assumes that it's always going to work. So
yeah. So again, it's like to the point you were saying, David, like it does come down to writing a really good document and helping, thinking of all the edge cases, and then once it's helping you once it's asking those edge cases, like having to have good solutions, have good instincts about how that solution should be, or how that problem should be solved. Anyway, I'm rambling at this point. I don't know if I've said anything different in the past 10 minutes than what I started with, but
I think
it's a brave new world out there, folks.
It certainly is. Good spot to wrap it up, though, I think.
Agreed. David, thanks for coming on, man. It's good to see you. It's been a while since we've been able to chat. Are you going to Laracon? You going to
Absolutely.
day 0, Laraprom?
Anything.
All right, nice.
Yeah,
that'll be
bring
awesome.
the wife, I think.
Good idea. I don't know. Like me and Michael were talking about it. Yeah, it's like I don't know how I'm gonna pull this thing off with like. I'm not sure. I'm just not sure how.
There's going to be a rental place. I'm not taking a suit.
Very probably. No.
I just and if you're going to prom, it's going to be a nasty suit that doesn't fit properly. That's going to be cheap. Probably got a stain on it. Like,
I have a suit. It's just not a tux, and so I'm like, do you want to be the guy that just has a
I
suit,
think there's going to be a
tux?
lot of people that will be there that either have a suit on or don't have anything special on and just show up anyway. Yeah,
they have two
exactly.
polos on.
Right. Yeah, so it'll be fun either way. It'll be good.
You're doing did you register for dodgeball?
Dodgeball? Where is that at? Show me, send me the link.
Day 0. Yeah, it's on the Laracon website. Dodgeball at I think it's 3:00 in the afternoon, and then Laraprom is after that. But yeah, I put my name down to participate because I'm sure that won't be bad for my knees at all.
No, not at all.
I'm gonna have to get my cardio up because playing basketball 2 years ago was like exhausting. It was like it attacks the heart when we were playing basketball. Oh my! I didn't realize how bad of shape I was.
Those terminal guys, really cool. they were. I mean, Adam. Yeah, I know. Adam played varsity hoops, so that's it's cheating.
I know. I wish I could.
Team
go
Laraprom
back.
Didn't take it seriously enough, apparently.
Yeah, I wish I could go back and do it again. Like that was super fun, but like I would be so much better prepared. Like if I went back,
Right.
like of course I wasn't on the original team, so like it's just we were sort of like bring them in at the last second sort of thing after they were already down by a lot. So that was tough, but it was a lot of fun. I still have the jersey hung up in my closet. I'm gonna maybe I'll bring that. Yeah.
I put it on every once in a while. I put the jersey on and the shorts and I just walk around and everybody.
Are you serious? You do that? Oh, that's so funny. I need to do
That's
that.
all
And
right.
I honestly, I'm gonna bring it this year and wear it to dodgeball. That's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should do
Oh,
that. That'd be
a great uniform.
actually.
Yeah.
All right, Michael, we on episode 198, is that right? Or 190 something?
191.
191. All right, folks. Find show notes for this episode at northmeetsouth.audio/191. Hit us up with any questions on the Everything app at Hey Hemp, or is it David Hemphill? Which one is it? David Hemphill.
It's David
At
Hemphill.
Jacob
I haven't
Bennett
grabbed the
and
other
at
one
Michael
yet.
Dorinda or at North South Audio. And rate us up in your podcatcher of choice. 5 stars would be incredible. All right, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us. Until next time, we'll see you.
Yep.